Topya. Popcorn.
Good morning. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary!
Tagal na rin natin magkasama, no? At although Quezon City Church started way back, the church did us sa Metro Manila started way back in the 60s. Ang nangyari, because of the growth in the church, we have Manila, then we have Quezon City, we have Marikina, we have Makati, and all the other churches, the South, Santa Rosa, Bulacan, and all that. So we're just very happy about the growth that we have, as well as the fact that we're still here and that we are appreciating our relationship with one another as a family, as a church. We have began a series on the kingdom life, which is basically discussing the series of topics as found in Matthew chapter 5. At least we're starting with chapter 5. My task is to look at a few verses there, and if you notice, ang topic ko na binigay ko sa akin is about living without anger. You probably have heard of that in past announcements. There's going to be a lot of change with that, as you will find out. Kanina po sa prayer, na-mention po yung about violence, and it is true. But when we look at the latest world news today, much of what we read about are people being killed. Okay? Yeah, there was a recent earthquake in Italy in which about 200 plus people, or almost 300, are now dead. And we can look at those events as very tragic. But I think more than that is the tragedy that we should feel as Christians when death comes as a result of another human being killing another. Okay? So it is very sad that much of the news today that we hear is about terrorism, school shooting, sectarian violence, and what have you. In fact, a friend of mine who works at the GMA News has told me that in their news, their primetime news of 6:30, what they would like to get as the very first news, or the very first news that they want to have immediately are news about crime. CCTV footages. And for what reason? Why do they want to highlight those? It is because of rating. They want to compete with the other channel. And so in order for them to be watched first, because that means a lot to them, they have to show footages, they have to have exclusive news about, unfortunately, about violence. What is it about violence that attracts us as viewers to prefer it, to want it, to want to watch it, that makes networks earn from it? What is it about violence today that has to be the one to catch our attention? And news are not covered by censorship. So kung anong pinapakita doon, nakikita rin ng mga bata yan. And that's prime time. Diba? In the US, usually hindi pinapakita yung mukha. Pero sa atin, minsan makikita pa yung mukha. So it's a very, very sad state of affairs that we have. Of course, when you read also the newspapers, a lot of it is about violence. So it reflects both, one, our attitude towards violence, crime, and all of these things have somewhat become somewhat very callous to it. That's number one. Or probably number two, because there's just too much of it already happening. The occurrences are such that we see it every day. It's no longer the news because it has deadened our senses and we have become callous to it. Still, media feeds on that. And the gruesome the violence is, the better it is for them. Okay? So violence is not just in killing or murder, it is also in words used. We usually think of violence as something physical. When you hit another person, that's violence. When you hit a child, that's violence. But we need to be aware that violence is also in the words used. Okay? In fact, pag nagmumura tayo, much of the words we use are violent. Okay? Why is it so acceptable today to hear, for example, people in leadership saying, "Papatayin kita," and we laugh about it? We laugh about it. Or papatayin ko siya. Or babarilin ko siya. As if these phrases are jokes or something to laugh about. What has happened to our senses that we no longer are affected by these statements and we take them very, very lightly? Is it just the media to be blamed? Or is it us, that even as Christians have taken these very, very lightly, as if the word "papatayin kita" means nothing? Okay? We need to recognize that in those words, "papatayin kita" or "babarilin kita," there is that very little estimation of human life from that person saying those words. What is the root of violence or killing or murder? How do we get rid of it, and how do we maintain a life free from any thoughts of it? Today we will be talking about this topic as taught by Jesus himself in the Sermon on the Mount, as found in Matthew chapter 5. We can say that the teachings found in these three chapters, 5, 6, and 7, are kind of an explanations or clarifications of the laws and the prophets, of which the Jews are already very familiar with. Okay? So ang mga Jewish people po, they know the law. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law are really experts in the sense that they have memorized it, they know it in detail, and they can really explain it to you. But we will look into that as to how Jesus actually expounded on the laws and the prophets. He shed light by giving his perspective, understanding, and proper interpretation of the Jewish religious laws. The Sermon on the Mount is meant to amplify the Old Testament laws and the prophets. So let's begin now by reading verses 17 through 20. Let's start with verse 17, and this is now our text. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. So Jesus premises his exposition of the law by clearly stating, this is the preface of what he's saying. He's saying, I have not come to abolish. So very, very clear. He's not there to do anything to change or to abolish it. Okay? I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So then I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law, until everything is accomplished. So, whatever he will say in the next few verses that he will we will be reading is in fulfillment of, okay, in accomplishing of the law and the prophets, and not to abolish or change or minimize it or ignore certain details about it. Jesus clearly states in verse 17 that he has not come to, when we say abolish, kasi parang abandon or disregard, which is the very foundation of religious beliefs and practices of the Jews. In fact, the Jews are very, very picky when it comes to people changing the law, because that's very sacred to them. It is their identity. Jesus emphasized this point and says that nothing, not one little, yun yung parang stroke of a pen, sabi na, will be ignored. Verse 19, now therefore anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly, that is, mean to say, minimizing the commands, or setting aside what is not convenient, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay? So the kingdom of heaven is all about reflecting the life intended by the law and the prophets. This kind of life is not as easy as it might seem. Okay? Even though the commandments are clearly laid out, easily understood, available to be read, and it's read in the synagogues during that time. Okay? The Pharisees and the teachers of the laws have failed to somehow see the deeper intent of these instructions. That is why Jesus here is trying to explain it further. The Pharisees were adept technically to the details of the commandments, but somehow missed the whole purpose of it all. They know well the letter, but have missed the spirit of the law. This is why, in verse 20, as we have read, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of God. So what does this mean? Diba napakataas na utos, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees. If you are a Jew, you look up to Pharisees and teachers of the law. They are the authorities. They know about the law. They are the ones who can best interpret it. But yet, Jesus Christ is saying, you who are not teachers of the law, the disciples at that time, have to surpass. How is that possible? How is that possible? It is possible when we understand or when we fulfill not the letter of the law as the Pharisees were doing, but the spirit. When we live by the spirit of the law, the intent of the law, then our righteousness surpasses of that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who are just fulfilling it by the letter of the law. So Jesus shows us in these chapters on the Sermon on the Mount just how that is done. But let's read now verse 21, and this is the main verses ko, starting with verse 21. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, in other words, you have heard that it was said to your ancestors, do not murder. In the King James, it's do not kill. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. Murder is a better translation than kill, because murder entails intent. There is that intent to kill. To kill could be accidental, but to kill someone may mean accidentally killing someone, but to murder is different. It is carrying an intent. So tama po yung interpretation of it. Verse 20, verse 21. The Ten Commandments is being spoken of here, and being highlighted is the fifth commandment, which is you shall not kill, or you shall not murder. The Jews are very familiar with that. Not murder is not killing anybody. Okay, so For the Pharisees, as long as you don't kill anybody, you have fulfilled the law. But Jesus Christ is saying something else that we shall later read. Those 4 words are easy to understand, sabi ko nga, and even a child can understand that. But instead of just ending the discussion on murder with just these 4 words, we shall not murder, Jesus expounded some more as we will read in the next verse. 22, please. But I tell you, the word but is not a negation of what was the command, or what the command just said. We shall not murder. But here is like saying, but I tell you, this is how it should be said. Okay, it's not a negation. Anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Or another translation, anyone who is angry without a cause with his brother will be subject to judgment. Aha! Just by being angry without a cause is actually a violation of the 5th commandment already. So this is now the difference between the righteousness of the Pharisees and the righteousness that God wants in terms of just being angry without a cause. Now the word brother here is, the literal meaning of the word brother is someone who comes from the same womb. So literally, a brother na talagang blood-related ka. So, yun yung literal meaning yan. It could also mean, we can expand the meaning of that to mean someone who's of the same race, someone of the same culture, someone in the same family. Kumbaga, there are many higher applications of that, but basically the literal meaning of that is kilala mo. Okay? Kilala mo. One of you. Next is, again, anyone who says to his brother, Raka, is answerable to the Sanhedrin or the council. Ano ibig ko sabihin ng Raka? Raka is a term of reproach or disgrace or disapproval. It is an insult. In our language, the equivalent will be what? Tanga. Okay? Walang alam. Ano pa? Bobo. Ano pa? Walang silbi. Walang laman ang utak. Di ba naririnig natin ito, lalo na sa mga amo? When you come to think about it, it's very common, okay? And we can laugh about it because it depending on how it's said, no? Pero kung sinasabi mo to and really mean it, you are violating that 5th commandment there. So what is being angry? Now words are coming out of your mouth, which is an insult. At hindi lang yan. Makikita natin in the last one, but anyone who says, ito na yung kumbaga level of intensity, sabi, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. So we can see that the fulfillment of the 5th commandment has deeper roots and it has deeper meaning than just not killing somebody. Ano ibig sabihin mo ng you fool? Pag sinabi mong you fool, it means that person is stupid. Okay? Stupid. Dull. Di ba kung minsan nag-uusap-usap ang mga tao, and then all of a sudden somebody says, shut up. When that word shut up is said to that someone, it's equivalent to this: you fool. You have no right to even speak. You're not worth listening to. You are not worth your life. So this estimation of another human being is not actually factual. Okay? Yung estimation mo is not factual because that person actually may know something, but it is actually personal. Christ is looking at our hearts. Christ is not just after what is said, whether it is true or not. Christ is more concerned about what's inside us that makes us say things like this. When we consider another human being as worth nothing, okay, we are in danger of hellfire. And when we are thinking of another human being as worth nothing, remember the commandment, "You shall not kill"? That's the one being addressed. Because when a person thinks that another person is worth nothing, he is worth nothing. I can kill him. I can kill him. He's worth nothing. So can you see where this is now leading to? How that spirit of murder is actually coming from a very low or no estimation of another life, another human being. So this is the root cause of murder. It is rooted in a very low estimation of another. It is rooted in a very high estimation of ourselves, which is actually pride. Pride makes one feel superior. It breeds an attitude of belittling another human being or considering others nothing compared to oneself. Pride makes us look at ourselves as gods. We can take life of another with impunity. In pride, we are able to decide the worth or fate of another. In pride, we begin to determine who deserves to live and who deserves to die. Pride leads to hate, and that leads to murder. You probably have heard of the phrase hate crimes. Naririnig niyo na po ba yun? Tinatawag na hate crimes. Okay? Let me just give you statistics, okay? This is from the FBI. This is statistics. This was from the 2 years ago. Less than 2 years ago. And as far as the FBI is concerned in the US, the hate crime that is most prevalent to them is racial. Racial. Naalala niyo yung sinasabi ni Kate kanina, and how Paul was very clear in the fact that the Jews and the Gentiles are totally separate. As far as the Jews are concerned, they have nothing to do with the Gentiles. We Jews are the people of God. We Jews are the only true people of God. We Jews have the right to exist more than you. So there is that prejudice against the non-Jews. So it's interesting that even at that time, your race or your culture is actually a big issue and has become the root cause of their animosity, simply because of no choice of your own. You were born a non-Jew. Can any one of us, or did any one of us choose that we become Filipinos when we were born? No. And simply because you're not a Jew, when you lived at that time, people look down on you. Okay? And so hate crimes, 48.5%, almost half of all the hate crimes is racially motivated. What's the next highest? Sexual orientation, 20.8%. Dito pumapasok yun simply because you don't agree with the sexual orientation, you have the right to kill or be violent against that person. And interestingly, the third one, religious orientation. 17.4% of all the hate crimes recorded in 2014 by FBI is religious orientation. Isn't that ironic? That people who should be abiding by no violence, no murder, no killing, account for almost 20% of the hate crimes. There is that disability, which is 1.4%, meaning to say, if you have certain mental disorders, you can become a victim of a crime. If you are a male or a female, or especially the female, you can be a victim of a crime because of your gender. The FBI defines a hate crime as a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or part by an offender's bias against a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. Hate itself, according to the FBI, according to this definition, hate itself is not a crime. That's how it says it. And the FBI is mindful of protecting freedom of speech and other civil liberties. They cannot classify it as a crime because hate is something that's internal. Once it's acted out, then they could probably say it's a crime. So it is, as this definition says, it is a bias. Alam niyo yung bias, yung parang tendency na it's not because of reason, it's not because of something else other than you just feel like it. For example, I was talking to somebody one time, and he has this office, and his staff, the staff of that office, were all white and Asian. Okay? So I asked him, would you consider having a black as part of your staff? I didn't know. For whatever reason. Tapos sabi niya, well, they're more likely to commit crimes. They're the ones that are involved in drugs. Is that out of reason? Aren't white also involved in drugs? Aren't white or other skin color also doing other things that the blacks are also doing? I mean, those are kinds of, that's what I mean by bias. It is not based on facts, but you just feel like it. I mean, I'll give you another example. Who among you would consider, if you're single, would consider marrying a black person? Would you like your son or your child, your daughter to marry somebody who's not your color? So I'm just sort of asking these questions to make us think whether we are acting really based on facts or is it on bias. Because this whole amendment is making us examine our biases. And bias can be a trigger for violence and hate. And we may not be aware of it. A lot of our biases are not something we're aware of. And this bias comes from our pride also. Note the last statement that hate is not a crime, sabi ko because it is internal. But look at this. The definition of FBI is hate itself is not a crime. It is true, because you cannot prosecute something that's just in your mind. Okay? But Jesus Christ says here, we have to go beyond just the act. But we can, as Christians, think of hate against our brother as already crime, as far as following the commandments of God is concerned. Right? So that's how different it is. It is this, what it means to live, to surpass the righteousness of the Pharisees. It is what is intended. It is the spirit of the law that we should be concerned about. It is not just the physical act, but it is what's happening inside of us. And Jesus Christ is very, very careful. But He wants us to see what's happening inside of us. He wants us to see what's going on. Not just what others see, but what God sees. We need to have that kind of sight by which we're able to examine ourselves and see whether we are in fact following the spirit of the commandment. Because to hurt somebody is not to kill somebody. To insult somebody is not to kill somebody or murder somebody. No? To think ill of somebody is not murder. But as far as Christ is concerned, you are already committing violation of that commandment just by thoughts, just by your pride, just by your hate. Let's go to verse 23 now, because I think this is part of the discussion on the commandment. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, meaning to say you are doing your religious duties, you're offering a gift, an offering to God at the altar, and there, remember that your brother has something against you. Isn't it interesting that it was when this person was at the altar, or when we are in the altar, that we remember it's God convicting this person, or God convicting us. In the presence of God, as we try to be right with God, sometimes God makes us remember our offenses against another human being. And that we remember that your brother has something against you. In other words, you have offended your brother. Maybe you have said a terrible word. May binitawan kang salita na nasaktan mo sa kapatid mo. At naalala mo yun. Ano sabi ng Panginoon? Next verse, please. Leave your gift there, in front of the altar. Kalimutan mo muna yan. What is more important, sabi, is first go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Then complete the ceremony, or complete your offering. But first, be reconciled. Napakahirap nito, di ba? When we're honest to ourselves, it is difficult. In other words, what if God says to us, you know, huwag ka muna kayo pumunta sa service. Makipag-ayos ka muna sa asawa mo, makipag-ayos ka muna sa kapatid mo, makipag-ayos ka muna sa iyong kapitbahay. Nasaktan mo yung kapitbahay mo. What if that's the case? Kaya pa natin gawin yun. In fact, in doing that, that is in itself a worship of God when we are able to do that. And then it is just completed and say, then come and offer your gift. Okay? That's okay. But remember, the conviction there of going first to your brother that you have offended is something we may need to think about more and do more. As if to say, please be reconciled first to your neighbor before before I can accept you here in the altar. Next verse, please. Verse 20. And then,
35?
25. Okay.
35.
Sabi rito,
Ayoko 32.
settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Aha! So Christ is now being practical here. Kanina it was an offense against a brother, but this time, the offense is such that kung sino man yung offend mo is not taking you to court. Now, in our society, this probably applies very well. Because ang daming cases, court cases, na nangyayari. Okay? Dito sa Pilipinas, hindi siguro as much as, say, sa US. Kasi sa US, pag may sinabi kang masama sa tao, that can be a cause for a suit. It can be a libel, can be a defamation, offense, and all that. So napaka-seryoso po pag sa US mo ginawa yung something like this, talagang isusuka. Anong purpose nila? Not only to correct the wrong, but also they'll earn from it. They'll earn from it. Sinong will earn from it? Of course, the defendant, but also the lawyer, the law office. So this is very, very true. So settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. This is the advice of Jesus Christ. If we have offended someone to the point that a file has already been thought of, or a case is already being thought of or prepared for you, or maybe has already been done, do it while you are still with him on the way. You know? Parang pumupunta kayo sa korte. Mag-isip-isip ka na. Kasi kung ikaw ang naka-offense sa kanya, ikaw ang makukulong. So sinasabi, rather than fight the case, magpakumbaba ka and make amends. While you're still with him on the way, or he may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the judge, and you may be thrown into prison. So settle matters quickly. Whatever that quickly may mean. Okay? It could be pakumbaba ka, it could mean bayaran mo na siya for the offense that you made. But don't let it get to the point where you're on court hearings and all that, because it can be very, very expensive. It can be time-consuming. It is emotionally draining. It just destroys the whole relationship in yourselves. Kahit na remember na kahit ikaw yung nasa tamang lugar. But in this case, ikaw yung mali. Ikaw yung mali. Next, last verse. Truly I tell you, if you have not made amends, you're the one who is wrong. I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. What Jesus Christ is saying is the violation of the law on merger has both spiritual consequences as well as physical consequences that can be very, very costly. And it can really get you to the point that you will sell your house, you will really have nothing, or you will be in prison to the point that life is such a misery from that point on. What do you think is the key there in settling matters quickly? I'd like to think that to settle matters quickly is one, to admit your mistakes, to be humble, and to compensate that person for whatever has been done outside the court. But in order for you to admit your mistakes, pride has to disappear, and humility has to be the one we need to take in. We can see how seriously we should consider what we say and how we say it. More importantly, we need to carefully consider our ways when it comes to our estimation of the potential of another human being, especially the life of another human being. The life of a person is so precious to God. It is priceless. Man may be able to replicate artificial human organs. A few days ago, I was watching this very old, malalaman na kita ko dito. Yung, alam niyo ba yung the $6 million man? Sino nakakalam nun?
Ano?
Sila ho yung mga
Driver lang ako.
kuya. Okay.
Driver lang ako.
Okay, the $6 million man is about an astronaut who lost, who had an accident, and then he lost the function of his arm, his two legs, and he was blind. He was blinded. So what technology did was that they replaced his eyes, I think it was that eye, with a bionic eye, and his arms was replaced with electronics, robotics at that time. So remember, this was 1970s, so those were new concepts. Okay, ngayon robotics is so common. And 2 feet, 2 legs, feet, everything. His extremities were changed so that he became superhuman. So, in our technology today, we don't think much about the replacement of arms, legs, things like that. Even heart. We've already had heart replacement and things like that. Even though it may have been short-lived, from Charlie's model, I think, I remember right. But remember, man can replace certain parts of a human being, but he can never replace a life. That's most. When somebody dies, for example, drowning accident, when the last breath is gone, and you can no longer resuscitate a person, that person is dead. So no matter what you do, you can never replace life. That is why do not murder is making us appreciate just how precious life is, how difficult it is for us, how impossible it is for us to replace another human life. In the Old Testament, a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye, a life for a life. Now, when we have committed these mistakes in our lives, we can be thankful that Jesus Christ, who is the teacher in this Sermon on the Mount, actually is the one that can be our propitiations for our offenses. Jesus Christ came so that our errors in life would not be permanent. Jesus Christ came so that our mistakes in life, even if it may be murder, can be such that He can renew life of another person. Even if we may have killed another person, that person can be brought back to life by the power of Jesus Christ. Even if we may be the ones that have offended and we have made a misery of our lives, Jesus Christ can renew our life and bring back, reverse the consequences of that murder when the time comes. So it is so important for us now, as we look back at this very simple 4 or 5 verses, as we recognize our need to examine ourselves about fulfilling the command of do not murder, that we bring in Jesus Christ. We bring in Jesus Christ who was murdered himself, but he did not retaliate. He was murdered, but he willingly went through that process of crucifixion. He knew it was good for us. Our sins against him, kung isipin po natin, lahat po tayo ay murderers because we have killed Jesus Christ. But thankfully, because of what He has done, His sacrifice for us, we can have another life. We can have a new life. Hindi lang po life out of prison because we nakulong tayo tapos wala na tayo sa kulungan, but a life that is true freedom in Jesus Christ. So, in conclusion, brethren, I want us to see that indeed all of us need to be aware of the root cause of murder by being aware of our pride, our biases, our hurtful or hatred thoughts that we all have. We have seen in this message that our words of insults come from a heart that shows little value of the life of another, who are not like us, who are not one of us. The violence so prevalent in our society today, as I have said in my introduction, is but a reflection of just how much we have disregarded this command to not murder. This is a serious command that we all have to take very, very seriously. In the greater intent of the law, we should not even hate. Instead, we should learn to love, to forgive, to bear one another's burden, to sacrifice for the sake of another, even if we may be right. Even if we deserve to revenge our wrong, Jesus Christ teaches us to instead give way and let God be the one who will take care of the situation. Jesus encourages reconciliation, restoration, and preservation of relationships among us all, brothers and sisters in the faith. So brethren, as we celebrate our GLF anniversary this year, let these words of Jesus Christ point us to Him, that may our love grow, especially towards one another. Sabi naman ni Jesus Christ in one of His last statements is, love one another as I have loved you, in the same manner, in the same degree, in the same extent as one another. To let that love be a testimony to others, so perhaps others can see our love and be part of our congregation and grow with us, and let GLF grow even more. This is our mandate. This is our mission. Let us live without hate. Let us live without pride or anger. Instead, brethren, GLF, let us live with love.